Next on the show, the clock is ticking for hundreds of Canadians still trapped in Sudan. The United States Secretary of State announced two rival generals in Sudan have agreed to extend a nationwide ceasefire for 3 days. That's beginning early this morning. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says the government is exploring options to help Canadian citizens escape. On Monday, a German plane airlifted dozens of Canadians out of the country. A Canadian C-17 transport plane in the region is on standby to help. And I should mention that ceasefire, that started yesterday morning, April 24th. Aurel Braun is a professor of international relations and political science at the University of Toronto and an associate of the Davis Centre at Harvard University. We've reached him in Toronto. Good morning.
Good morning.
First off, what are the potential risks that Canadians trapped in Sudan are facing?
This may be the beginning of a large-scale civil war. The violence has already been severe. More than 400 people have been killed. The two warring factions, the Sudan Armed Forces, the SAF, and the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, led by rival generals who cooperated briefly to get rid of the previous government. Now each seems intent on taking total control. The ceasefire may not last very long, and as the violence increases, it will be ever more difficult to get people out. So the faster we get our Canadian citizens out, the better it is. But there are communications problems, logistical problems, and frankly, that of political will.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you next. I mean, the main challenges from a logistics point of view. What are those main challenges when it comes to evacuating citizens from war zones?
Internet services often tend to be relatively poor or intermittent. This is the case in Sudan. So we already have refugees who tell us that they did not get the communication in time. So by the time that they were able to get the message, it was too late to get to the assembly point. They had to find other ways of getting out. So this is a very common difficulty in any of these kind of situations. Then you have the logistical problem of having the means to get them out and then the will to get them out. So in the case of the United States, you have vast capacity, but it's not that great a will. The Biden administration has been extraordinarily timid in many areas in international relations. They are terrified of the possibility of bad images, that if they send in more planes, they could be attacked, and you would have a situation that would look similar on television to the disastrous American withdrawal of the Biden administration from Kabul. They do not want Khartoum to look like Kabul. So the Americans only sent in a couple of Chinook helicopters. They extracted fewer than 100 people, including 6 Canadian diplomats. So you have more steps taken by the Germans, the Italians, the French, the British. We had Canadians brought out by the Germans, for example, who are sending in C-130s. And so we in Canada have limited resources. Apparently there's a C-17 in the area. We should use it sooner the better. But these kind of crises also highlight a very basic problem, that you need to have capacity, and that is military capacity. Our Canadian armed forces have been underfunded for a long time, and every time there is a crisis, it highlights the cost of that underfunding.
So, Aurel Braun, let me ask you, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says they're exploring options to help Canadians stuck in Sudan. You just mentioned a bunch of obstacles that what makes it difficult to get people out, but what else for the Canadian government? What else is the Canadian government facing when it comes to providing assistance for the stranded Canadians?
We have to rely on allies, and we have to, of course, provide financial support for all of these measures, and I think we are beginning to do that because we see that our allies are helping to bring people out. But we are looking at a very large-scale operation within a very short amount of time. The window is 72 hours at best, and there may be 1,500 plus Canadians, over 15,000 Americans, 11,000 Egyptians. And so it is highly unlikely that we're going to get all of our citizens out within this short window. So we may be faced with a situation weeks from now or even months from now, if this devolves into a large-scale civil war, where we will have to deal with this problem, and we may not be able to get citizens out by air. We'll have to get them out across borders. We may even have to deal with unsavory characters and local officials to cooperate to get Canadian citizens out, and this could be quite costly. This is why warnings about not going to risky areas or leaving from risky areas as soon as possible need to be heeded by Canadian citizens. When a country becomes unstable, when there is conflict, then having a Canadian or American or German citizenship will not necessarily save you. So warnings issued by the State Department over the past 3 years, level 4 warnings, yes, should have been heeded. And Canadian citizens and others have to learn that it is unwise to take risks. Now, true, some people just can't leave. But in some other cases, I think it's absolutely essential to appreciate that they should not gamble in volatile cases.
Thanks for your time on this, Aurel Braun. We'll hear more on this on World Report at the top of the clock at 7 o'clock as well. So thank you for joining us on Information Radio.
Thank you.
Aurel Braun is a professor of international relations and political science at the University of Toronto and an associate of the Davis Centre at Harvard University. We reached him in Toronto.